Welcome in everybody to another episode of the Fantasy Football Happy Hour podcast. I am your host, Ricky Valero. On today's episode, we're going to continue on with the path that we've been going on. The first episode, we tackled the quarterback rankings. Second episode, we tackled the running back rankings. If you want to go back and listen to both of those. Today, we're going to be taking a full look at our wide receiver rankings, kind of going over our top 12, highlight some disparities, some underrated guys, some overhyped guys. Talk about, first full week of preseason, maybe talk a little, dabble a little bit of the yesterday's games, which saw some interesting things. We do know that there's going to be an even larger committee in New England for running backs. It's the clear stay away every year. But as always, I am joined by my partner here, Mr. Matthew Fox. How are you, bud?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I was just looking it up to see if Ramondre Stevenson ever stopped running from last night. You do not see. He was considered like more, or at least by me, I thought he was going to be more of like the goal line smashing kind of back. So to see one of his first games, 91-yard touchdown sprint, nobody was even in the screen with him for a while. It's impressive.
It'll be interesting to see if he's another one of those guys that just skyrockets up the draft board, but still stays as the running back 4 in New England. You know what I mean? I'm staring clear out of that backfield basically completely anyway, because I think it's a complete disaster. We saw, before we dive into this week's topics, we saw a little bit of Mac Jones yesterday. I was impressed. I did like what I see. I thought he took command of the offense. I really wish they would have let him take a little more risk with the football. I do think that he was a little bit of a game manager yesterday, and I've seen that criticism on the Twitter.com over it. But it is what it is. You know what I mean? That's
kind of the Patriot thing, though, too.
Yeah.
I mean, there weren't a ton of seasons, especially in the early run of Tom Brady, where he was out there just like an old gunslinger. He was maximizing his opportunities, not turning the ball over, using all the weapons they have, and they play defense. That's kind of the Patriot way. It was fun to see him. It was fun to see Ryan Fitzpatrick out there. Looked like he's having the most fun I think I've seen in a couple of years. Had some beautiful connections with Terry McLaurin. You love to see it, especially as we look at wide receivers today. And I forgot Adam Humphries was on Washington until he caught like 27 passes last night.
There was a lot of things. I was very disappointed. I was hoping to see a little bit more Gandy Golden yesterday. He was robbed on that 2-point conversion. I just want to throw that out there.
I still don't know why they're ruling that incomplete, but
I don't either. I forgot that Steven Montez was playing for Washington. It was interesting to see him get 24 passes.
Lamar Miller.
Yeah,
Lamar Miller.
Lamar Miller had 14 yards for 3 yards. I was like, I didn't even know. This is the time of year where like, oh, that guy plays there, and that's the reason why it's kind of fun to go back and look at these. Let's everybody make a big ordeal about Dwayne Haskins looking decent. And I'm just like, guys, if you look, first off, it's against the Eagles. Second off, it's his competition is Mason Rudolph and Joshua Dobbs. Like, let's calm down a little bit on that. But
to be fair, in the Hall of Fame game, I thought he looked atrocious.
Yeah, to be honest with you. And then, of course, the QB1 in Philadelphia, Mr. Joe Flacco, looked good yesterday. He threw a 3-yard pass that went for, 79 yards.
Speaking of ADP going through the roof, I saw so many Quez Watkins truthers come out of the woodwork last night to be like, hey, look, finally he gets the opportunity. This is what we're expecting to see all year. Who was expecting that?
Yeah, exactly. The thing I would like to bring up, and we'll talk about it more next week with our tight end episode, but I will say, as long as Zach Ertz is on this roster, he's going to affect Goddard's level throughout the entire season. We saw it yesterday. He had 2 catches for 20 yards. Yeah, Goddard had 1 for 34. There's not going to be enough mouths to feed with both of these guys in that offense, and I do think that it's going to hinder. I've seen him in the top 5 of like almost everybody's rankings, but I just don't see him returning that value this year at all, until Zach Ertz is off the roster. And right now, it looks like he's going to be on an opening day. So until then, we don't know.
That's the thing. We got to be honest. They're not going to cut Zach Ertz because it doesn't benefit them financially to dump him like that. So it's going to be some kind of a trade. I have all offseason expected him to be gone, but the closer we get to September 12th and him not being gone, we talked about this yesterday on the roundtable. Matt Bruning and I were talking beforehand. It's almost possible they carry Zach Ertz into the beginning of the season and try to feature him for a couple of weeks to see if somebody will take him. Well, that's also crushing if you're like waiting for the Goddard breakouts.
Exactly. Without further ado, we're going to jump into a segment that we're going to do every week. We're going to highlight some games of the week that Matt likes and kind of highlight some of the conversations surrounding each of those games. So, Matt, I'll let you get and kick it off with your first game.
Yeah, so I picked 2 games. I will say, first of all, I will sadly be watching the Broncos and the Vikings. I have it set to record because I'm working tomorrow. But I'm not going to highlight that because I'm afraid of what I'm going to see. But just know, somewhere late Saturday night, there will be a grown man in Colorado Springs weeping openly at the quarterback options he has for his team. Which brings us to my first pick of the week, Jets versus Giants. It's Saturday afternoon in New York. Really kind of curious to see these. I had put on here before RIP, he went for an MRI. I was excited to see Elijah Moore. We won't see him. Who knows when we're going to get to see him, but we should still see a little bit of Zach Wilson, a little bit of Michael Carter. Want to see kind of what they look like. 2 teams that share the same stadium. And on the flip side, really curious to see Daniel Jones. We probably aren't going to see Saquon. Even if Saquon said he wanted to play, if I'm the Giants, I'd kindly pass on that. But Jets Giants, kind of a fun rivalry. There's a lot of questions surrounding those teams. That's 2 units where I have the quarterbacks kind of high end QB3. I would like to see what they do, how they're starting to settle in, and then my other big pick is the Sunday game. We only have 1 Sunday game because it's preseason, but it's actually a pretty good one. Panthers at the Colts. Really curious to see Sam Darnold in this new system in Carolina. And for Indy, I don't know how much we're going to see of Jonathan Taylor, but it has now turned into a sort of quarterback competition between Jacob Eason and Sam Ehlinger. This is not the quarterback competition the Colts fans were hoping to see, but it has turned into one. Curious what those guys look like. It does seem like they got some good news that Wentz looks like surgery went well for him and Quentin Nelson. It's possible they're back week 1, but with Carson Wentz, it could always matter. I'd like to see what these guys look like, what some of these young receivers look like. I think that'll be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because we've seen it's camp. So you see a lot of mumbo jumbo, crazy talk. I've seen Zach Wilson looks like a steaming pile of garbage. And then, of course, you highlight looking at, I've heard Daniel Jones. You see one play, and, of course, Twitter blows it up. You know what I mean? Daniel Jones threw the ball right to his linebacker. And I'm just like, that's what we saw last year. Were you guys surprised? But the thing about it is the Giants have weapons, right? You know what I mean? They have the tools. They have the pieces. Barkley's going to play week 1. We know he's going to. How much he plays, we don't know. I still think that we've been a lot of people have been undervaluing what Saquon Barkley, and people seem to forget how good Barkley really is. Barkley has every opportunity to be the running back 1 throughout this entire season. It wouldn't surprise me if he finishes there, but I don't. If he has the full 16, 17 games, Barkley's going to be a top 5 running back, period. You know what I mean? Like they get the ball in his hands and he makes plays, but they do have playmakers on that team that kind of help him out now. You know what I mean? The signing of Kenny Golladay was important. I think that they can stretch the field a little bit. I also liked, I do think that Zach Wilson will look okay. I think that I would like to see what he does. Michael Carter, the pecking order of the running backs. I know it's still early to kind of see what we get with that. I would like to see what Sam Darnold does in Carolina. I still think it's a lot earlier, and I refuse to talk about Sam Ehlinger as a quarterback. He's more of a tight end anyway. So,
I know it was kind of shocking to me. Was it shocking to you that he's splitting first team reps? It seemed like they were set with Jacob Eason was the first man up, and then now it's like, well, maybe not.
Well, I think what it is I think that he's looked good, and I think it's smart to kind of see what you've got, right? Because if Wentz, I still don't think Wentz is going to play week 1, which is fine, right? You know what I mean? We talked about on the show, if they lose week 1, or maybe they sneak out a little W in week 1. We don't know what that'll look like per se, but at the same time, it's not a bad idea to see what you got on the roster because Eason's unproven, right? He doesn't have any gameplay under his belt. Ehlinger is not very good at quarterback. And the thing about it is they're the polar opposite quarterbacks. One's 6'5", one's about 4'2", one can throw the football down the field, the other one can't. You know what I mean? It's weird Well, the more you think about it, yeah, it's kind of surprising that he's getting first team reps as I break it down a little bit more. But hey, who am I to say? Big man Frank Reich got himself an extension, which kind of surprised me a little bit. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's done some good things, but I still think that it's interesting that we're giving out extensions before we kind of see what this Colts team does this year.
He has been dealt kind of a crap sandwich, though. I mean, when he took over in the shadiest of shady situations after Josh McDaniels basically hosed them and managed to have a pretty successful first season. I think they went to the playoffs because that was Andrew Luck's last season. And then many of us going in, I know I did, going into that season where Luck surprise retired right before the regular season, I thought they were Super Bowl contenders. I thought they had a great roster and that they had rebuilt a lot, and that's a credit to Reich and Ballard. It's tough to go from thinking you're going to have Andrew Luck to having Jacoby Brissett. And then last year, you can only coach up the people you got. Last year, he got given a Phillip Rivers, who I've never been a huge Phillip Rivers fan because we've been in the division, but he was a pretty rock steady quarterback for a lot of years. He did not look the same last year. He looked like a guy that probably was at the end of his career, and they still won 11 games. They almost won that playoff game against a pretty hot Buffalo team. I think he's done a good job with what he has. It's like for a long time, they've been a quarterback away from being able to make a run. I was excited to see him reunited with Wentz because that season where Wentz was tracking to be the NFL MVP was with Reich as his offensive coordinator. It seemed like it'd be a good matchup. Unfortunately, you get this injury stuff, so I think they may have to punt a little bit more this season. So I thought it was a nice demonstration of faith. Their owner has been more vocal about not really wanting to roll Carson Wentz out unless he's 100% week one. I also think the Colts, while you'd like to say this isn't a factor, have a pretty giant incentive to be cautious with Wentz, because if he goes below 75% of regular season snaps, that goes from a first round pick to a second round pick. And that's pretty huge in terms of draft capital.
Absolutely. Transitioning over to our wide receiver rankings, we're going to kind of go over our top 12. We're going to go list our 12 through 7. I'll kick us off here. Let me make sure I'm doing my math right again this week. Last week I struggled with it, but I do believe I'm going to kick it off at number 12 with DJ Metcalf for the Seattle Seahawks. Number 11, there we go. That comes after 12. Amari Cooper for the Cowboys. I got CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper back to back. As if I was going dynasty, obviously the gap is a little bit further. But this season, I'm still skeptical on I think both guys will eat, and I think they will both eat a lot. You know what I mean? This year, I think with Dak being my tentative, top 3 quarterback, I think at the end of this year. But coming in at number, so that was number 11, 10. Number 9, Robert Woods. I'm excited to see him in this offense. I think that he's going to have a monster season this year. Him and Kupp both, especially with Akers gone. I do think that's going to be a factor in them throwing the football a little bit more. And then coming in at number 8, I got Allen Robinson. I do believe that he'd be higher if I knew Justin Fields was starting week 1. I still believe that Andy Dalton's starting week 1. I really, really do. I don't know why I think that, because it doesn't matter. Too. I don't know why, but I just feel like it would be, I don't know. I don't think they paid Andy Dalton that much money to not play at least one game, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. Throw him out there, let him play terrible and be like, you know what? It's Justin Fields time.
Well, it's opening week on the road at the Rams. The Rams were the number 1 defense last year.
Let Andy Dalton get killed. You know what I mean?
If you're playing the long game, that might be a safer, Aaron Donald may not be the introduction you're looking for Justin Fields.
Yeah, and coming in at number 7, I've got A.J. Brown. I'm making a flop on the fly here. I got A.J. Brown at number 7. I think I like Calvin Ridley a little bit more. Not as much as you do, but you'll talk about that a little bit later. But I like A.J. Brown, but his value did take a big step back because of the trade for Julio. I do think that Julio is going to take some stuff away from him. Maybe it's the touchdowns, but so that's my 12 through 7. What about you?
Yeah, and I'm going to say it looks like, looking at our thing, about the top 15 of receivers, we have approximately the same people. We just kind of have shuffled orders. So, like, I have Cooper and Lamb pretty close together, but I have Amari Cooper just top end wide receiver 2 at 15, and I have Robert Woods top end wide receiver 2 at 14.
Yeah.
Whereas I have a couple of guys that you dropped just down. But when I get into my 12, I went with AJ Brown at 12. That's right about where he was last year. I don't think having Julio Jones necessarily hurts him. I think the fact that Tennessee's not an incredibly high volume passing offense limits some of his ceiling. I love the talent in dynasty rankings. If you've been following along this offseason, I've often had him up higher. I like the receiver. I just don't know, he does a lot of his on efficiency, and I think that's still going to have to continue. Top 12 makes him a wide receiver 1. Wide receiver is a loaded position. So I went 60 deep on this week's post, which will come out later this afternoon. And I feel like all 60 of those guys, I would be comfortable starting, either as a wide receiver or flex this year. There's a lot of great talent. Number 11 for me is Terry McLaurin. He finished as wide receiver 20 last year with a combination of Too Careful Alex Smith, Kyle Allen, and Dwayne Haskins as his quarterback. So a nominal jump up to 11 with the GOAT, Ryan Fitzpatrick, or at least the GOAT of football beards. Felt like a decent move. I really like his talent. I have CeeDee Lamb at 10. I think this is the year he flips over and becomes the Cowboys' true number 1. Only had 200-yard receiving games last year. Both of them were in the first 5 weeks with Dak. I think he will do a lot better with Dak than he did with the Red Rifle and Ben DiNucci last year. Number 9, I have DK Metcalf. I like the talent. Seattle, another team. I'm not sure they're incredibly high volume passing. He does a lot of his with some big plays and touchdowns. Number 8, Justin Jefferson. Last year was incredible as a rookie. I think Minnesota may not throw quite as much. I have him sliding back just a little bit, still top 10, but a little bit back. And then 7 for me is Allen Robinson. I'm with you. He has the talent to be a number 1. This is, whether it's Andy Dalton or Justin Fields, probably the best quarterback he's played with. So I expect big things from Allen Robinson.
That's to say the least, even if you bring Andy Dalton into the equation right there. Number 6 for me, I've got Calvin Ridley. The talent's there. I think the upside's there. I think people are discrediting him because Julio left. But let's not forget somebody's going to have to catch the ball there in Atlanta. I understand Kyle Pitts there, but I think Kyle Pitts being there helps Calvin Ridley more than people are taking an eye for it. I do think they're going to run the ball a little bit more this year. That's why I think I dinged him a little bit down. Obviously, a lot lower than you do, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Keenan Allen, consistent. You don't get much better than that, period. You know what I mean? Like he's just that guy. We've already seen, speaking of preseason, we've already seen the Chargers come out and say that they're not playing any of their guys, which, keep Justin Herbert as, in bubble wrap the entire offseason, please. Thank you. Tyreek Hill coming in at number 4. I don't have much to say about him. Stephon Diggs coming in at number 3. Diggs was my number 1 for a long time. I paired him with my number 1 quarterback in Josh Allen, but upon receiving the news of one Mr. Aaron Rodgers returning, my number 1 goes back to the same it has always been because I think that he's hands down the best receiver in football. Coming in at number 2, DeAndre Hopkins. I do struggle with him ranking-wise because I am uncertain of the run game. I'm uncertain, and I'm talking about the upside of the run game of Kyle Murray. So that to me is something that mixes in. I think that we could see a downtick in his yards, and I do think they got a little bit more weapons there for him to kind of spread the ball out a little bit. And of course, number 1, as I mentioned, Devontae Adams, the best receiver in football. Rodgers is back. That's all I cared about this year going into this year. As soon as Rodgers came back, Rodgers goes back up the rankings. Devontae Adams goes back to where he's cemented for me and will be cemented until Aaron Rodgers retires or goes to the Broncos.
Yeah, and you and I have the same 6 players in the top 6, just a little bit of a different order. I love Justin Herbert, the Chargers. I have Keenan Allen at 6. He did some great things last year. Saw a ton of targets, and that was playing one game with Tyrod Taylor and playing, with Justin Herbert, kind of learning on the job. They don't have a lot of competition. I think Mike Williams will have a decent season. I moved him higher than some people have. I'm around 39, but Keenan Allen is is clearly the one. I think he and Austin Eckler are in for good seasons. Number 5 for me is DeAndre Hopkins. I like the talent. I like the fit. I think Murray runs a little bit more, so I don't know if they're at quite as high volume. And I think Christian Kirk could have a big year. They also added AJ Green and Rondale Moore, so they have a few more options. Number 4, I have Stephon Diggs. Like the player, like the offense. He's a clear number 1 there. A lot of competition, but he stands out for me. I think the rest of the guys are just kind of guys that will lead into each other. Same thing for my number 3, which is Devontae Adams of the Packers. Last year, he had 18 touchdowns. I'm not sold they have quite as many. I'm not sold Aaron Rodgers throws for 48 this year. May come back a little bit more on to normal. Having Randall Cobb doesn't scare me. I think it's Devontae Adams is a clear number 1, well above the rest. And then people like Cobb and Funches, Amari Rodgers, MVS, and Alan Lazard all kind of compete for each other. 1 or 2 of them has a couple relevant games. Good luck for you deciding when that's going to be. I think those signings more impact Robert Tonyan, who is a guy that caught 52 of 56 targets and turned them into 11 touchdowns. That's an efficiency that's hard to keep up unless you're Devontae Adams. So he's my number 3. Number 2, Tyreek Hill, very talented player. I would not leave a small child in his care, but fantasy-wise, he's just fine. And then number 1, shout out to all the Redditors who claim that I hate him, but I put Calvin Ridley as number 1. And I know what you're thinking, like, isn't everybody and their brother going to be covering him? I think we forget that Julio Jones missed much of the middle of last season, and Calvin Ridley did just fine. Saw 143 targets, caught 90 balls, 1374, and 9 touchdowns. Has even less competition now. I like Kyle Pitts, which we'll talk about when we talk about tight ends. I think Pitts and Hayden Hurst will both end up playing, and they'll do a lot of 2 tight end sets. None of them is Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley does other things. Calvin Ridley's going to be the man. I don't disagree with you that they would like to run the ball more, but I've also seen that Cordarrelle Patterson is their running back 2 on the depth chart right now.
Mike Davis to the moon, baby. Mike Davis to the moon. I've got so much Mike Davis. I need Mike Davis to the moon, Mr. Fox.
I love Mike Davis too, but last year was his career high, and it was just shy of 700 yards.
Hey, let's just not. We're not going to slander Mike Davis on this podcast.
We're certainly not going to slander his quads.
I threatened to quit the podcast last week over movie takes. I will quit the podcast this week over slandering of Mike Davis. All right. So my quick question for you is, let's see here. We're going to highlight sleeper. I want you to give me somebody in that bottom, maybe underneath that 25 range that you think that could really kind of surprise people this year. Maybe under the 20 range, however you want to do it. Actually, just give me somebody that you think's a sleeper.
So I have Odell Beckham Jr. at 28. I thought long and hard about where to rank him. I still like his talent. The Browns have a lot of players, but if we see some more vintage Odell where he's getting touchdowns, he easily vaults up into wide receiver 2 territory. Right now, with being more run first team and a lot of options, I felt more comfortable projecting him at wide receiver 3, but I wouldn't be shocked if he jumped up. We've seen it before.
I'm kind of upset because that was going to be my guy. I was going to say him, but now I can't say that. I'm going to say somebody else just because it's somebody else. You know what I mean? I can't pick the same guy you picked because then I would feel like that's just copying. I'm going to go with a guy that I think that is off the rails a little bit. He's ranked number 31 on my rankings. I'm going to go with Jerry Jeudy. I do think that I understand the quarterback play is a huge question heading into the season, and I do not disagree with that. But I love talent, and I think talent can, displace bad quarterback play. Look at guys like Allen Robinson. Look at guys like DeAndre Hopkins. Even Devontae Adams thrived with like Brett Hundley at quarterback. You know what I mean? They can thrive regardless of the situation. I think Jerry Jeudy is the most talented receiver from last year's class still. I still think that the Broncos got the steal of a draft in him. The talent's there. I think that he is an easy wide receiver 1 over the next 5 years. If they figure out the quarterback situation, this guy could easily be a top 7 receiver. Period, guys. If they figure out the quarterback situation, Aaron Rodgers, please go to Denver. I just really feel like I like the talent there, and it's somebody that I think on the outside looking in I could easily see finishing the season as a high-end wide receiver, mid to high-end wide receiver 2, and I wouldn't even be mad about it. So I just love Jerry Jeudy. Sorry.
I sadly had to watch him play last year, and I loved him preseason, and
he was rough.
He's in the Melvin Gordon, Teddy Bridgewater camp for me now.
Hey, look at this. Back-to-back guys you're just going to slander of mine. I'm not
you know, it's hard as that. I like Mike Davis. I have a lot of Mike Davis. I'm just not sure he can get 1,200 yards. If he does, to the moon. Jerry Jeudy.
If he does, I'm going to win a lot of fantasy football leagues this year. But I will say that. If
Jerry Jeudy has talent. I wasn't taken with some of his effort last year, and there's something that you see sometimes in receivers when things don't go their way. Pout's not exactly the right word, but kind of.
I get what you're saying.
Mentally, and that happened too many times. Like dropping some critical. Like there was a couple of games we straight up lost because he put the ball on the ground. A ball that I'm not a Drew Lock truther. I'm not going to say he's great, but he actually got the ball to Jeudy in his hands in a place to make big play, one of them being a touchdown, and Jeudy put it on the ground and came off the field pointing fingers. Those kind of things rub me the wrong way as a fan.
Absolutely. I totally 100% get that. And I think you take a guy that's used to winning and used to playing with guys that put the ball where he wants it to. And there was plenty of balls he could have caught last year. I just think that the talent's there. And I think a full off season there is also going to be key, I think. Give me somebody in that top 20 that you feel like, that you think is highly overrated or in the world being too talked about.
Well, I'm actually just going to point the finger back at myself and say I got really excited about DJ Chark. I have him at wide receiver 20. I know other people are really excited about Laviska Shenault, and I get those arguments, and I think we're going to have to see how it plays out. I like Chark's talent. I feel like last year what held him back was the fact that he was wide open and the ball was 20 yards behind him out of bounds. I thought with getting Trevor Lawrence, although it's typical Urban Meyer, he said he hasn't decided who the starting quarterback's going to be, just keeping Captain Jorts alive there. But I thought Chark would take a big step forward, so I've kind of ranked him in that range, but I do feel like that's probably a big gamble.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. The guy that I'm going to talk about, I think a guy that's getting overranked, and not dynasty-wise, but just I don't think Justin Jefferson can produce what he did last year. And it's not because he doesn't have the talent, because the talent's there. You know what I mean? I just think that if we get 16, 17 games of Dalvin Cook, which, I mean, that's questionable already as is, but if we get that, they're going to pass the ball. It was crazy anomaly for Justin Jefferson last year. And I don't think that it's not that he can replicate the stats. He's not that he can't replicate these stats ever again. I just don't see him finishing in the top 10 this year. I mean, I feel like I can go on a limb and say that and say, I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but I just don't see Justin Jefferson finishing in the top 10 again. And I just liked so many other guys that in that area, right? You know what I mean? If I've got my options between a Jefferson, a Lamb, I'm going Lamb, or a Jefferson, I'd even take Metcalf over it. I'd even take McLaren. You know what I mean? Like if I've got a picky choosy out of a certain bunch of guys, Jefferson's just one guy that I kind of expect to take a step back. And I think it might be a little bit more than what we are expecting, because to think that he can replicate or come really, really close to the stats from last year, I think we're kidding, guys, because I just don't see it happening. Even with an extra game, even whatever all these stats, I just don't see it happening. All right, so what's next? All right. Well, folks, that's really it for the. And I will want you to. Another thing, I'm staying away from the Bucs wide receivers too. I'm staying away from the Bucs period, except for Tom Brady. I mean, I would draft Tom Brady, but again, I don't know if I'm going to draft Tom Brady as high as he's going. But I'm just staying away from fantasy football in Tampa, period. There's just too much going on down there for me to really get it consistent. I think Mike Evans is probably the only guy that you can rely on to at least get you 10 points every week, but 10 points at where he's being drafted might not be enough. So with that being said, the movie corner's here. It's our favorite segment every week. You can check us out each and every week at themusiccitydrivein.com. We're writing consistent movie reviews, TV reviews, and of course this weekend you can check us out live as we give our thoughts on the brand new Ryan Reynolds film, Free Guy. So we're just warning you, the football talk has paused, and we're going to talk a little bit about the movies before we sign off and get prepared for the weekend. All right, so Apple TV is dropping, or did drop, a movie today. It is called Koda. It was a Sundance 2021 film that I watched at Sundance. I saw it twice in a week because it won an award, so you were able to rewatch it again. You like it a lot more than I did. I think and I say only issues. People forget I gave this film a very solid 4 out of 5 stars. It's still in my top 10 movies of the year so far, but I think it's a little cliche. I think it's a little bit long, I think, as well. I can highlight issues that I have with the film, but the message, the story, the performances, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, so if we're going to take anything away from this episode, it's that Reddit, Ricky hates Calvin Ridley and hates Koda. So please, football Reddit, film Reddit, I am rock solid on both those. You can let me go. You have a new target.
Thanks. Thanks.
No, for me, I've talked about this before. The difference scoring, I don't use 5 stars very much. If you follow me on Letterboxd, Ricky and I were making jokes about this. I have 40 things in my lifetime that I've given 5 stars to out of 5,935 things that I've ranked on there, which is a whopping 0.0069%. Koda is one of those 4 45-star things. I understand your points, and there were probably a few spots in the middle where they could have trimmed some of it up. I think you have a very young filmmaker who's kind of making one of the first big feature films. But it was a great cast. I thought Emilia Jones was phenomenal in the lead role. Eugenio Derbez was incredible as this kind of compassionate teacher. And there were some musical scenes and some family scenes when, Koda stands for Child of Deaf Adults. So it centers on Ruby, who's a girl whose parents are deaf. Her brother is deaf. She's basically their link to the hearing world, which makes her kind of in no man's land. She doesn't feel connected to the hearing world necessarily, but she also doesn't totally feel connected to her family because she has this passion for music, and the movie is about her finding this passion inside. I've always been very moved about stories of people finding that thing that they are great at, that they were meant to do, and being able to embrace that. And this movie has that in spades. There are a couple of scenes, the back half when her dad, who's deaf, is trying to understand her gift and what it means that I was.
Sorry, I'm going to talk really hardly into this mic and say we don't talk about that scene because I'm not going to cry on the air.
No, that's it. I mean, my 5-star formula, I've told Ricky, has to be entertaining, has to have a good story, and has to leave a massive amount of ocular fluid loss. And I definitely experienced all those things watching it. It was beautiful. It's the same, a couple of years ago, the first A Quiet Place, there's a scene between John Krasinski and his daughter when he's making a difficult choice to sacrifice himself to save them, and he sends her a message that was incredibly powerful, and that stuck with me, and that really vaulted that movie up for me. Koda has a couple of those scenes that just I was taken away and really moved.
Yeah, Koda is a powerful film, and you highlighted Eugenio Derbez. To me, I feel like he stole the show because we have the heart, we have the foundation, we have all of those things that I think are very pivotal within our main characters. But sometimes what's missing is that miscellaneous piece that really brings them all together, and I feel like that's what he did. And I felt like he was the backbone that carried Ruby to the next step, right? You know what I mean? Because without him, Ruby doesn't thrive. Without him, Ruby maybe doesn't take a chance and take a risk to go down that musical journey without her family. Bernardo Villalobos, I don't even know how to say his last name. There was a quote in the
He just has him call him Mr. V. So
yeah, Mr. V. So try to imagine what it's like to sacrifice everything for a human. And that's pretty much what sums up Koda and what it is. It is a beautiful, heartfelt film. It's some of the best ensemble cast you will see all this year. And the scene on the back of the truck, you might not see a better heartfelt scene in any film this year, period.
It's a toss-up between that and her audition scene.
The audition. Yeah. I mean, it's...
if I wasn't already hydrated, I had to go grab some extra water.
So for me, the scene on... Okay, so I grew up with my sister. My sister's deaf. You know what I mean? So it resonated for me, obviously, for so many different reasons. I can't relate to Ruby as being the only, one in the family. But, think of Paul Raci. Paul Raci grew up a Koda. You know what I mean? And Sound of Metal, that movie meant so much to me. And I think that Sound of Metal was a better movie overall, personally. But both of these movies highlight the deaf community in a way that I don't think that we've really seen depicted in this realm of understanding that they are normal. You know what I mean? Like, just because somebody can't hear does not mean that they are disabled. You know what I mean? They have things inside of them that are far greater than somebody that can hear inside of them. And the cast is phenomenal. The way Sienna Header, she used the deaf cast, you know what I mean? Especially highlighted by Marlee Matlin, who is just, you know what I mean? She's just that. She's that definition of that entire, beautiful story. And then, of course, the dad as well. The entire cast is phenomenal. Going from a really phenomenal film to a film that you didn't like, I liked. It's kind of sad on me a little bit.
I didn't
Maybe
dislike it.
No, but I will say Suicide Squad, I've rewatched it. I think it's a film that I'll probably watch maybe 50 times in my life just because it's easy to throw on. It's easy to watch, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a great movie like some people are mentioning or even have said that it's the greatest film that James Gunn has ever done, which is not even remotely close to being true. But without Fox not getting into a big battle, King Chark is the king, and stop your slander already. So there's that. Ratcatcher 2. We can agree on Ratcatcher 2, though, right?
Yeah, and there are things that I thought were good. Guardians of the Galaxy for me is another one of those 40 films that landed a 5-star. It's my favorite Marvel film. I was hoping for something a little bit like that. This one I thought hewed closely to that formula, but the music choices didn't hit quite as well for me, and some of the character dynamics didn't hit quite as well for me. I enjoyed pieces of it. I like it. I'm 100% going to buy the digital when it comes out. I'm sure I'm going to watch it a bunch of times. I didn't dislike it. I don't think giving something a C+ is a terrible grade. To me, it wasn't. I thought it was good. It wasn't great for me.
Yeah, exactly. No, and that makes perfectly good sense to me. And then recommendations for the weekend. I have not seen any of the 3 releases that are dropping today or dropped last night, whatever you want to call it. Don't Breathe 2, the sequel of the smash hit of 2016, is out. The trailer looks like a steaming pile of garbage, but that's neither here or there.
So was the first film.
Yeah, I mean, whoa, what?
I did not enjoy Don't Breathe.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, we're moving along. We do have Respect, the Jennifer Hudson-led Aretha Franklin biopic, which I have read is not good. Not very
our friend
good at
Kathy
all.
Woods was very disappointed.
She destroyed that film. I mean, obviously, I'm going to go check it out for myself to see what she saw there, but I'm not in a hurry to see it. I think it'll probably be on Hulu or whatever MGM or whatever studio that is going to have it on there sometime in the near future. I'll probably wait for that, but I am somewhat excited for Free Guy. I'm going to see that. I'm going to see it tonight.
I'm taking my wife for date night on Saturday when I get off of work. We're going to the Robin, going to get a nice little cheeseburger, and then we're going to roll over to Cinemark and watch it next to you.
So my biggest problem with Ryan Reynolds is he plays Deadpool and everything. And I really struggle with that because I went and saw Detective Pikachu, which I wasn't really excited about anyway because I'm not a Pokemon guy. But he played Deadpool as Pikachu. You know what I mean? It was like, come on, man.
Nobody disliked that movie more than me.
Oh, it was terrible. I think I gave it like a half a star, maybe 1
star.
Oh,
wait, maybe we're united. That was my pick for worst movie of the year.
It was terrible. It was. I wasn't a big fan of that at all.
It was weird.
I wasn't a fan, and I am not a fan. And Detective Pikachu. Here we go. I got it loaded. I gave it. Hang on 1 second. Yeah, I gave it 2 stars. God, I was generous. Oof. God, I didn't realize I was that generous. I'm gonna lower my ranking right now as we're talking about it. But with that being said, also watch Koda, Apple TV Plus. Watch that.
And John David Washington and Beckett. I'm gonna
check that out
in a few minutes. That's on Netflix.
I gotta watch that sometime here in the near future. I've got an interview that I'm gonna do here in a little bit. But make sure to check over to the MusicCityDrivein.com to check out all of the NFL team previews that the entire team of writers has been going over. It's been great watching these kind of pump out each and every week. I hope that you are following through and checking those out because they are going to be very, very formally to help you in your drafts. I hope you're tuning in each and every week to this show because I feel like we're trying to help you get prepared for redraft season. Also trying to remind you that do not do drafts yet. We still have way too many preseason games with way too many injuries coming out. So redraft season needs to not happen until at least after this third week of August or whatever it is, because I know it's weird because we only get 3 preseason games now instead of the 4.
Yeah. So really,
I think after the second preseason game, draft away. I mean, you can't really handle out training camp injuries. That's not really something that you can control, but you can control waiting during these game sessions. Some of these players aren't playing, but some of them will, and some will get injured, and you will draft them, and you will be extremely upset. So with that being said, make sure to give Matthew Fox a follow on Twitter at Nighthawk7734. Follow myself at Ricky Valero _. We're going to do this show as much as we can live each and every week. Next week, we'll be talking about the tight end position. Next week or the week after, I'm really kind of hoping to kind of throw some bets up for you guys, some over-unders for you guys. I'm really kind of hoping to hone in on that soon. Once I get a better idea of injuries, once I get a better idea of what's going on with Carson Wentz, because that really means a lot to what my predictions are. And my Apple Watch is going off crazy for some reason. I don't even know why.
Yeah, you haven't moved enough this hour.
Yeah, exactly. Sit up. Please stand up. All right. With that being said, thank you so much for listening to the show. And until next time, we'll talk to you guys later.